I talk a lot about sustainable beauty on this podcast, and we've unpicked all sorts of topics to do with biodegradability, biodiversity, carbon neutrality. After all, a sustainable beauty brand is one that thinks about its environmental footprint and social responsibility. And these topics are of vital importance in the drive towards bringing such a monstrously unsustainable industry, the beauty industry, in line with our responsibilities in the 21st century. But one aspect in this sustainability discussion is often overlooked, and that's the fact that a sustainable beauty brand is also one that has financial longevity and can stand the test of time. Pai Skincare is that brand. Having started as a tiny one-woman startup in Sarah Brown's garage out of a personal skin need, Pai now manufactures over 1 million units of natural skincare per year and helps millions of people all over the world with their natural skincare needs. Last year, Look Fantastic named Pai the 5th most popular skincare brand in the world, with almost 5 million global searches in Google. So in this episode, I learn all about Sarah's inspirational story, which I promise will inspire you to settle in because you don't want to miss this interview. Welcome to Green Beauty Conversations, the podcast that challenges you to think about how you buy, use, make and sell your natural beauty formulations. We tackle topics that will make you think and encourage debate about green beauty with your friends, followers or customers. I'm your host, Lorraine Dallmeier. I'm a chartered environmentalist, biologist and the CEO of award-winning online organic cosmetic formulation school, Formula Botanica. We have thousands and thousands of students in over 175 countries around the world who study with us to become organic beauty formulators and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com to try our free online formulation course. In today's episode, I am thrilled to be joined by Sarah Brown of Pai Skincare. Sarah launched Pai in 2007, a certified organic skincare line for sensitive skin. Pai formulates and manufactures all products from its custom-built facility in London and is taking the world by storm. Sarah is on a mission to create formulations that are so natural, so ethical, and so sustainable that they have goodness built into them. Although, as you'll learn in this interview, Sarah still feels that Pai is in its infancy, the brand has achieved global recognition and is a highly respected and praised natural skincare brand loved by millions worldwide. I'm so pleased to be joined by such a powerhouse in natural skincare on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. It's so lovely to have you here.
Lorraine, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we finally got this in the diary.
Me too. I can't wait for this conversation. So let's dive straight in. I want to know more about your journey of starting and growing Pai Skincare. So first, let's start off with the beginnings. Why did you start and what was it like when you first started?
Well, I have to cast my mind quite far back. I think not everyone realizes that we've actually been around for quite a while. So I launched this business very back end of 2008, really. And it's been quite the adventure since then. But why did I start the business? I mean, I think we are a classic tale of a business born out of a problem. Sometimes they're the best businesses because you're fixing something. My problem was my skin. I developed a skin condition called chronic urticaria. I still have it. And it was my experiences trying to manage this condition that brought me here, brought me to do this business. I can give you a little bit of the kind of snapshot of what happened, but my condition, this is a very common condition. It's never talked about. It affects a lot of people. It onsets very quickly. So it onset in one night. I had extreme hives over 80% of my body. I was referred to Charing Cross Hospital. I was in and out of their dermatology clinics. And after a flurry of tests and meetings or appointments, I was sent on my way with some very, very high strength antihistamines to take 24/7 for the rest of my life. And that was it. And I think, this is 20 years ago. I think at that point, we didn't think about skin in the more holistic way that we do now. So we know it's so closely linked to our gut. and our mental well-being too, and stress and management of stress. But I instinctively knew all that. And I knew that while it wasn't the cause, it was often a trigger, but nobody was speaking that language. So I was sent on my way. And I think that the kind of long story short is that I lived with it for a very long time. I actually saw an autoimmune consultant this summer, so almost 20 years later, and said, what's the latest on this understanding of this condition? And he said, we're no further along. And it's one of those conditions that's actually most closely linked to depression. It's really interesting because it's so unpredictable. It just flares, and it flares it can be in quite a kind of volatile way. Yeah. So I think I had to join the dots myself, and I lived with it for, as I say, for a long time, but I did reach a point. I was like, actually, I can't sustain this, and I need to understand what's going on. And I realized I'm going to have to do this by myself. So I did. So I kind of literally documented my life. I unpicked ingredient lists, because one of the issues with chronic urticaria is, for me, it would make me hyper reactive to anything that I put on my skin, having never had to think about what I put on my skin. And that was the big change. And that's what got me into this world, because I started looking at ingredient lists for the first time ever on my skincare products. And I think it's really hard when you work in this industry and, you know your INCI lists and you know your ingredients, but we have to sometimes take ourselves back to your average consumer and remember that they don't know how to read an ingredients list. It's absolutely impenetrable. And for me, as somebody who absolutely needed to know what was in the bottle, I had to do it myself, unpick it. And I think it is a tale of frustration and exasperation that how I was marketed to and mismarketed to. But the positive story at the end of it is that it unlocked something in me that I didn't know was there. And I kind of say, hooray for hives, because had that not happened, I wouldn't be here. I just suddenly got so interested in cosmetic ingredients. And from there, particularly the therapeutic and remedial properties of plants. And from there, when they're organically grown and cultivated and harvested, and it was just love, really. I just fell in love, and that was it. And so I started the business out of a very drafty garage in Ealing Broadway with absolutely negligible cash, was totally self-funded, for many years. And I often say to people, I only feel like I'm just getting started, to be honest, because we've been so chronically underfunded and cash starved for so long. But yeah, I started the business, ran out of money in 3 months, went back to worked 3 days a week, paid 4 days a week on Pai, and just over a long, long time learned to make 6 products. I launched with 6 products. But the kind of what I wanted to do with Pai was, I guess, give people products that they could trust, rely on, that would really help with their skin, but could trust from how I presented ingredients, was rooted in those sort of sustainable values, actually, even then. And that people, but also that were a joy to use. And I think that's the crucial thing. When you have a skin condition, you are sent down the pharmacy aisles often. You're presented with aqueous creams that cost, £5 and don't have any fragrance and are quite oily emollients and not very pleasant to use, and actually do nothing for a lot of people. That's how Pai was born, out of a garage, no money, but we've come a long way.
You certainly have. And obviously we're going to cover some of that in this podcast episode. I mean, what an incredible beginning you had. And as you say, hooray for hives, I suppose. I would love to know what Pai Skincare is like nowadays. And I'd love to know some numbers, like how many units do you sell, or how many staff do you have, or how many countries do you sell in, so we get a bit of an idea of the scale, because what you've built here is phenomenal. So can you give us an insight into how big the business has got?
Well, it's funny because I think it's the classic entrepreneur's sort of curse that your harshest critic. So we think we're still tiny and we still got, honestly, I say it a lot, but I do feel like we're just getting started and we're just figuring it out. And to that point, for anyone listening, I think we're 13 years young. It takes a long time sometimes. You do see these brands that become overnight stars, but you know what? They are called unicorn businesses for a reason. They are very few and far between, and most businesses, it's a long, hard slog. We still make our products. It's the thing I'm always most proud about, and that we can talk more about that, but it's such a passion that we manufacture, and I'm very, very proud of it. We're about 63 people now. I'm pleased to say we've moved out from the garage, and we now we operate in about 12,000 square foot in London. We have our own custom built production site there, but all of our headquarters is there. we've outgrown it. So we're looking at another 18,000 square foot to move into, which would just be the production side. So that we'd move just that out and keep both buildings. We manufacture about 1 million units a year. Mm-hmm. There you are. There's some vital statistics.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I know that a lot of the smaller brands that we work with are just often one woman in a garage or in a shed. So they're listening to you thinking, oh my goodness, this is huge. But I totally get what you're saying, because I have it too with Formula Botanica. We've been going for 10 years and you look at it and think, oh, there's still so much to be done. And I suppose you never stop feeling that way.
But I think that's the mark of maybe a good business owner and founder, is that there's always more. I don't know, in our world of formulation, it's such an exciting place to be. It's what we love, is the creation process is what we love. And as we've grown, we've been under a lot of pressure to outsource that piece, particularly the manufacturing piece. And, I always said, well, that's fine, but we wouldn't be Pai anymore. And we've always felt it's so integral to who we are and our passions. So formulating is an exciting place. There's so many amazing ingredients coming on the market all the time. There's a lot of fun to be had, and there's a lot of innovation to be had. And we want to be at the forefront of that.
Absolutely. And by the sounds of things, and we'll come on to this a bit more, by the sounds of things, you are tying more into your ethics and the ethos that underpins Pai. You have very firmly and proudly stayed loyal to the organic label, rather than feel the pressure to jump on the bandwagon of clean, green, vegan, any other categories that we're seeing finding traction. And, every single month, Formula Botanica is approached by a new certification scheme, and we sit there and go, it all sounds great, but there's just too many of you now. So why organic?
I've sort of been waving this flag for the Soil Association for a really long time. I have huge respect for what they do, and they're now kind of form part of Cosmos, and it's a much more, harmonized European standard. And it's its first beauty only standard, which is so important, and I think brings it a lot more credibility as well. When I was starting out, I think what I think people still don't understand, I didn't understand until back then, was just the broad ethical dimensions of organic certification. People think about it's how the ingredient is grown. It is, but it is one tiny part of what organic certification means. It's how it's grown. It's how those farmers are treated. It's how that farmers community is looked after. It's making sure that we're minimizing impact on their environments, not draining their soils, not contaminating their local water supplies. It goes on and on. It's making sure that ingredients, we need to think of end of life, not just of packaging, but of what's in the bottle. What happens to those ingredients when you wash them down your plug hole? What happens when they go into our waterways and lakes and rivers and oceans? It's about not using endangered plants. And I think that's the one that we would have been really tripped up on completely inadvertently had we not been certified, because they give you counsel there and say, do you know what, maybe you shouldn't use rosewood because that actually is an endangered tree. Did you know? No, I didn't. So it's these, they also look at how much plastic you use. And that's always been part of the audit that they do to make sure you're not using excess packaging. It's such end-to-end sustainability. And it's the thing that now has a name. When I started, we didn't really talk about that word. And I don't think if we did, I don't think people had any idea what it was. But organic absolutely embodies it. And I think being certified organic and making our own products gives this very unique view of our supply chain. But yeah, it's a great standard. But above and beyond all of that, which is, I feel very passionately about, the number one thing is really the quality of organic ingredients. If they are, because they are certified organic, they've been really, really meticulously grown, and that due diligence has been done on how they're extracted. And we then make sure that those beautiful ingredients are looked after. So we make sure they're stored very well, and we make sure that in the production process, they're handled respectfully and not overheated. You can't miss any of these steps. But when you look after and protect that ingredient through to the very end, and it sits in that end formula, the concentration of properties and benefits and antioxidants and fatty acids is just poetic. They are beautiful, beautiful ingredients. You spend a lot on them. So why wouldn't you look after them? But, it's a bit like cooking. If you cook with really high quality ingredients, you're going to have a highly nutritious and delicious meal. And if you don't, you're less likely to. So you've got to invest in the core ingredients. And for me, above all of it is the quality. I think that you get an unrivaled quality with organic, but it brings this other ethical piece that for me, starting out as a business owner, they were the values that I wanted underpinning my business. You know, we wanted to be a good business. God, we don't get everything right, and there's masses we still need to do. But fundamentally at the core, these values were things that we wanted to speak to and was part of being a responsible business. So that's why I chose organic. We are vegan too, you know, we just happen to be. And I think, you know, it's really interesting because you used the word clean, and it drives me absolutely bonkers because, and I speak very vocally about this too, but it's a meaningless term. And it's made greenwashing. I mean, I've always got very het up about greenwashing, but it's 10 times worse now. It's really sad. It's getting progressively worse, not better. And terms like clean have not helped. And I know there's lots of great retailers that are trying to do a lot around this and improve things, but fundamentally it's a self-referring standard. It's fundamentally a brand can say, I'm clean because I don't use this ingredient. So why that ingredient and not these other 10? Or where do you draw the line? And I think coupled with that, it sort of went down a slightly dark place with the kind of vocabulary used around it, which was non-toxic. I was just like, I really object to that word, implying that if you don't use a clean brand that you've self-referred, you know, a standard that you've self-referred here is somehow toxic. I mean, of course it's not. And I think it's selling through fear, which I have hugely object to. And I think when I first launched, actually, interestingly, there were lots of there were a few brands in our kind of midst of natural and organic. And actually it was quite fashionable then, just not quite the right word, but the way to market was often know this. So no parabens, no mineral oils, no whatever. And it was no on the pack. And we never did it. And we said, you know, that's fundamentally, it's a negative marketing. And why not talk about what's in it that's great? And so we've never gone down that route of no. We've always gone. And unless it's in the specific product that is completely relevant to why we made that product that way, focus on the amazing ingredients and the positive story, because there's masses to say about them.
Absolutely. This is music to my ears because this is exactly what the ethos of Formula Botanica is as well. We don't use clean. We don't use non-toxic. In fact, I even put it in our brand standards that no one's allowed to use it because you're right. It is all about lifting up the positives of these incredible ingredients that we can use. And it clearly shines through in the brand that you've created as well, because it's very much what Pai Skincare, at least how I perceive it, to stand for. So let's talk a bit about your overall brand, because I know that you've rebranded during the pandemic. I mean, that must have been a whole fun exercise in itself. Obviously, you had it planned. You've got different packaging. You've renamed some of your formulations. Can you talk us through why you made that decision and what the main drivers were?
I couldn't bear the packaging that we had. I couldn't even look at it anymore. I felt embarrassed by it. Felt really out of date. It wasn't distinctive in the market. It didn't embody us as a brand and personality of the brand. I think we have got some personality, and it just didn't, you know, going back to the point that we make our own products, every product has an amazing story to tell. We weren't telling those stories. We weren't communicating our values. So there's all these reasons. And we tried to rebrand for many, many years. And this was sort of probably second or third attempt, but we hadn't quite landed it. And we kept going. And so this particular outcome, we'd spent 2 years sweating the details over. I mean, it was a long, long process, but we love it. And now I look at the brand and I go, this is Pai. This is who we are. And this is what I always envisaged, but never had the money to do. And I think that's the other thing is that up until recently, we'd never had a designer's eyes on the packaging in this complete kind of all-encompassing way. Yeah, we finally could really put some thought to how do we communicate now in a much different market. I mean, to what I launched in, it was a much more crowded market in the natural category, which is great. You know, there's room for all of us. That's the point. So, you know, I'm delighted that there's more competitors out there and the natural category's grown, but you've got to be clear on who you are. So it was a lot about that. There was a big sustainability push too, because we'd done quite a lot right. I mean, we'd never used laminate on our packs. We used vegan inks and we used lots of glass. We did quite a lot right, but fortunately the market had moved on. So the packaging, there's been a lot of advancements, and we said, okay, well, we need to evolve. We need to be at the forefront, not just catching up. And And I think, one of the things I've always thought about, and I think about a lot as a business, is fundamentally I'm making lots of stuff. I'm putting more stuff into the world. And you've got to reconcile. For me, I've got to reconcile that and be able to sleep at night. And I have a massive issue with landfill. For me, the concept of digging a hole in the ground and putting your crap in there and then covering it up and leaving it to sit there for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years is just wrong. We can't do it. And actually, when you're producing, and you know this, beauty packaging, very complex, the componentry very complex, very unrecyclable, much of it. Anyway, so we just said, okay, this is our opportunity. We're never going to get this opportunity again to look at the whole range, 25 SKUs, and look at it and fix them all now. And we knew there were kind of certain products that just we could do better on. So we made a lot of improvements. We still use a lot of glass. It's about 50% glass, but all the plastic is now PCR and/or bioplastics like sugarcane. Not perfect either, right? Because they're quite hard to one-way recycle. All of our packaging we use no adhesives. I mean, everything is thought through, and we got rid of leaflets inside, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it goes on and on and on, but we did a good job. I think there's a couple of packs we're still not happy with, but it was reconciling how do we protect the bulk and the formula inside and make sure it dispenses properly and all of that stuff. We've had a lot of years of glass bottles and dip tubes. Not a happy place because you leave half of it in the bottle. You have to think, but we've got some work to do, but we're several steps ahead of where we were. And that was very satisfying.
Well, congratulations, because it looks very beautiful. And obviously you've put a huge amount of effort into it. And it sounds like a massive undertaking. So I'm sure you're all very proud of the results. So let's talk a little bit about manufacturing, because you mentioned this a couple of times already. And I think this is fascinating because I see a lot of people go to market and immediately outsource manufacturing. But there are some core brands on the market, such as Pai, who say, right, we're going to keep this in-house. So what made you decide to keep manufacturing in-house? And what do you feel are the pros and cons of doing so?
This is a battle we fought continually for 13 years as we've grown and as we've scaled. Fundamentally, we've chosen to keep it in-house because of the quality of the ingredients we're using. We source them so meticulously and they're so meticulously grown that we don't want anyone else to touch them. And we don't trust anyone else to touch them. So that's at the heart of, if we're going to maintain quality, we've got to have control over that. We've got to be all over it. And it is the control freak in every founder, but it's crucial to end product quality. So that was a big one. I think when you're starting out, there's lots of pros of doing it yourself because, you'll know, you can do small runs. You can almost produce to demand, which is what we were doing. At the end of the day, we're still in this perishable goods space. If you're making a cream, it's going to have a best before date on it, and it's going to have limited shelf life. And if you're going to a contract manufacturer that you need to buy 10,000 units and you are just starting out, you are ending, I've seen it so many times with compatriots in the industry of having to just ditch products, send it to landfill or discount it out the door, which is terrible for your brand equity. So there's all sorts of great advantages when you're small. Own your formulas. You can make them unique. You can, going back to that point about sustainability, you can be much clear. You can have much clearer visibility of your supply chain. It's very hard to do that when you outsource that manufacturing piece, really. And the other thing is I think, so I'm talking about the pros here, obviously, but I think you can move really quickly as well. So you can work very dynamically. And I think an example of that for us was in March last year, we could see the iceberg coming. We sent everyone home in the beginning of March and, looked at our empty building and went, what are we going to do? And I always remember Matthew Paris talked about there needs to be a coming together. We need to have a good wall. It was that sense. And we said, okay, well, what can we do? And we turned over the factory and we started making sanitizer. We turned one round in 2 weeks. We had 13 formulas because of what we couldn't get our hands on certain emulsifiers and certain alcohol. And so we were just iterating continually just to get it out the door. And we were going on our bikes and delivering to tube stations, checkout staff from the supermarket. People hadn't been thought about yet. It was really interesting. That's very early times, nurseries staying open for frontline workers. We were giving them. So we donated 23,000 units, I think, in the end, which was most of what we produced. But we could do that in 2 weeks. And that's just one example of how you can, and I hate the word pivot because it's been rather overused, But you can move really quickly. You can do really interesting stuff. And we have this Pi Labs, which is our kind of innovation hub now. And it's where kind of our cosmetic chemists have no brief. They can work to no brief. They just get to have fun. And we can get, that's when a new ingredient can come on the market. You can get something out quickly. That's one of the kind of great advantages of doing it yourself. Disadvantages, I'm afraid, outweigh. I think it's really important to be really honest about it, because you don't do this. This is not for the faint-hearted, and you don't do it unless you genuinely are passionate about doing this, about creating and running a factory. The costs are extraordinary as you scale. It's fine when you're early stage, but it becomes as you get bigger, and particularly if you're producing emulsions, the equipment you need, it's £1 million a machine. You need a lot. The footprint you need of space is huge. And also, you've got to be thinking about this stuff. If you've got a plan and an ambitious growth plan, you've got to be thinking about what space you're going to need in 18 months' time. You can't suddenly go, oh, we've run out of space. You've got to be planning, because it takes so long to fit out factories, order the machinery. It's often custom built for you, but the costs are absolutely eye-watering. And on that note, you can't really do it unless you're funded. I mean, unless you're extraordinarily rich. But we had to seek external investment to do that. And when you're having those conversations with kind of private equity houses, unsurprisingly, when you say, I need £1 million for a machine and I need £2 million for a factory fit out, and it's not really what they want you to be spending the money on. They want you to put that £3 million into an advertising campaign. And I look back at what we spent on scaling our manufacturing. And if we put that into sort of marketing, we'd be 10, 20, 100 times the size we are. So it's a choice, and it's not a choice for everybody. And I totally get that. But fundamentally, we love it. You come into the building and we're making cleansers today because you could smell it. It's just, and I think also, and COVID's really affected, I think it sort of impacted our culture a bit, because there's been no one there. And we're kind of bringing everyone back, and people are re-feeling that culture of when you make a new product and you create a new product, we will bring everybody into a room and celebrate it, because everybody has had everyone's been involved in that process, all under one roof. And it's something very, very special. And then, our production team they're so committed. They want every product to go out the door right and perfect, so that customer's first experience is great, and that it's going to help them and help their skin. That's why we do it. I think it just gets harder and harder as you grow, because you've got a lot of supply chain complexity. And that can go very sticky very quickly. Yeah. So you need a really good ERP system. Well,
thank you for sharing that so freely and openly. I mean, that's really interesting to listen to. And I know that a lot of our listeners will be taking note as well. But I love what you said about the quality of your ingredients being the overarching driver. I interviewed May Lindstrom on the podcast a few months ago, and she said exactly the same. They keep manufacturing in-house. There were so many parallels between what she said and what you just said. And I love hearing that. So I want to talk about one of your products in particular, because it's one that's come up in our communities quite often. It's one that I've used many times and absolutely love. It's your rosehip regenerate oil. I mean, it is a phenomenal formulation. And I think, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that it contains quite a lot of CO2 extracts, maybe quite high percentages. And I've never seen a brand do that before. Pai did. I think you guys are pioneers in this, no pun intended, in that respect. So how hard was it to pioneer this formulation when it first launched? Did you have any problems getting it to market because of that?
It's 10 years old now, so it's kind of hard to remember. But I mean, the first thing to say is the margins on it are absolutely terrible. So the raw material costs are extremely high, and it's probably the lowest margin product we have in the range. And even at the price point we sell at, it's not great, but we just wanted it to be a really accessible product. The heart of that product when we launched it was we knew what rosehip could do. And we'd had a really bizarre story where a customer had been using our chamomile and rosehip cream, it's now called the Anthemis. She'd had a very bad road accident and used it on scars, and to relieve the itching and, that horrible itch after when scars are healing. But it had been a very bumpy scar, and she'd needed a lot of skin grafts, and she'd used this product and said, oh my God, it's amazing. Can you make me a bucket? I was still in the garage at this point, and I said, sure. So I made her a bucket. She literally bathed in it. Went back for skin grafts a month later, and they said, you don't need them. And they said, what have you used? And she called me up, she said, patent it. And I said, I can't patent the formula, but she said, it's the chamomile. I said, it's not the chamomile, although that's lovely. I said, it's the rosehip, because rosehip's very healing and very regenerative. And so I always remember my partner in crime, who's also my husband in the business, said, bottle rosehip. And I said, no, there's like millions of them in the market. But it was really interesting because the rosehips we saw in the market did not bear any correlation to what we saw. They were very pale. They smelled very flat and quite rancid. Rosehip in its purest form is peppery. It's a lively aroma. It's got 4 omegas in it, beautiful fatty acid profile. It's just an extraordinary ingredient. So I always say, never do a product the same. It's got to be better than what's on the market. And so we said, okay, well, we think we can do it very differently. And it was to go CO2 route and to use the whole hip, not just the seeds. And it's the most concentrated on the market by miles. But you almost compare it to a cold pressed rosehip. We should never cold press that ingredient anyway. So yes, it wasn't hard. I think it was a different approach of, well, we just don't recognize what we see in the market. We don't recognize, and it's not our experience of that ingredient. It became just a cult product over the years. But it comes down to that point that we talked about earlier on in this conversation about, and you buy well and you invest in the ingredients, and those ingredients are so conscientiously cultivated. That's the magic that happens. I believe that really beautiful organic ingredients can do magical things.
I love it. And I agree with you. And I have to say that is a fantastic formulation. And if any listeners haven't tried it, I do recommend you go and get your hands on some because it is stunning. And what's interesting is I spoke to a couple of safety assessors when I first came across your rosehip regenerate oil. And I said to them, how high can I go in terms of CO2 extracts? And the feedback I had from all of them was so diverse, so completely wildly opposite. Some of them went, well, as long as there's no essential oil in it, you could in theory go as high as you want. And others were going no more than 1%. So I think it's fascinating that you've got this fantastic high percentage CO2 formulation out there. And I'm not surprised it's doing so well. So tying in with that, and I know that a lot of what Pai Skincare tries to do is tackle sensitive skin or help people with sensitive skin. And the number of people who identify as having sensitive skin is growing. So how do you think natural formulations can help people with those sensitive skin challenges?
It's a really interesting question because, to be really clear, natural is not always best for sensitive. And that was part of my challenge when I was experiencing my urticaria. There's 2 different dimensions to this. Natural's not always best, and you've got to be really careful about things like essential oils, and also natural's not always natural. So that was the other sort of dimension. I mean, I do think that from a personal experience, natural ingredients had a transformative impact on my skin. But it's not, I don't think you can, and also there are, going back again to that point about the magical properties of plants, I think certain ingredients can be extraordinary for sensitive skin, whether it's a really beautifully growing chamomile right through to ceramides, which you can get from natural sources now that can really can really help build the barrier. There's all sorts of, so I do think natural ingredients can really play their part, but it's not, it's the formula. It's how you bring them together. And, you can get brilliant natural base emulsion cream and put some chamomile in it. It doesn't make it great for sensitive skin. Really interestingly, certain more natural preservatives I can't go near, whereas parabens I was fine with. The irony. So I don't think it's as simple as natural is great for sensitive. I think it's natural plus. And I think you have to, and also everyone's skin's different. So we really acknowledge that you've got to sort of think about the whole picture, and you've got to know your own triggers because there can be natural ingredients that trigger you. So, but, generally speaking, I think to that point when it's grown really well and you haven't got, it's extracted well, grown well. Certain ingredient, I think certain natural ingredients can be really beneficial. And I do think the skin can almost sort of, it's not the right word, but almost metabolize it better. You've got the sort of better affinity with the skin, but it's not a clear picture, I think. And that's what I learned, is that I went full natural as a consumer and actually arguably had more problems. And a really interesting example of that, and this is more in relation to acne, because I also was struggling with adult acne. It's a joyous time. I went, kind of full natural. And at the time, a lot of beeswax was used in creams to, I think, bring some more viscosity to it. And it would just sit and clog my pores and break me out, as just one example. But that's the point. It's not always the answer.
Very true. It's not clear cut, that's for sure. I remember those beeswax creams. Some people even tried to emulsify with them as well, which was always fascinating to watch because it never worked.
You used to get a lot of peanut oils too, used quite allergenic, obviously. But.
Well, you've been such a pioneer in the industry, and I know you've seen massive change. I mean, you've already talked about it in this interview so far, in how indie and naturals are perceived since you started your business. And we all know that the next big change to come to the sector is a need for brands to embrace sustainability. You've also talked about how you're bringing that into the organization. So can you walk us through a little bit more on how you're embracing sustainability at Pai Skincare?
It's great to see the industry sort of sitting up now, because I think we have been historically a terribly polluting industry. Right now we're fixated on packaging, and that's really, really good because we produce a lot. So great, but we've got to think about end-to-end sustainability. It's my biggest frustration is that people fixate on the pack. And I touched on how we'd moved to a PCR plastic and we'd moved to bioplastics. And it is a step forward, but problem is that it's really complex, because where do you, just going back to packaging, we'll come back to the end-to-end bit, but if you think about packaging, if people can't recycle from their curbside, is that better? Does that not present different problems? And we have full recycling guides. We encourage people to go into their stores to recycle. We encourage them to send it back if they can't, and we'll recycle it for them. So we have a full recycling service, but it's not perfect, is it? So there's a lot more to do there. And it comes back to being organic again, and also owning the process, is that you can have a better understanding of end-to-end sustainability. And it goes back to what is in the bottle. How is that behaving in our environments? And that's what we've got to think about. So it's why I've been so passionate about organic certification for so long, because it embodies it. It honestly embodies the sustainability piece. And it's really helpful to as a brand owner to have that. So, but there's so much work to do. The challenge is right now is if there is a big movement and it's not going anywhere, and that's great, but it's still relying on the minority. You've still got often the indie brands pushing forward and driving the way, not entirely, but until I think we have some legislation on it, you need retailers to apply pressure. So if retailers said we wouldn't accept any products that don't tick certain boxes on the sustainability front, that would change. My concern is at the moment, it's all moving in the right direction. Honestly, it's great. And what I'd say to any brand owner listening is something small is fine. You don't have to have it all sewn up. No one does. It's really difficult, but start and do one thing and be proud of that. But it makes a difference. But the problem is that, I'm impatient and, I want to see meaningful change at a meaningful pace. And certainly in my lifetime, but ideally in the next 5 or 10 years. But we're not going to get there if it's just relying on the moral compasses of independent brands who are driving a lot of it. I think you're only going to have impact if we have retailers applying this pressure and having set criteria of what they'll accept, because that will change things and that will focus minds. And then the even better way is to bring some legislation around it, which is quite timely.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's really interesting you raising these points. I mean, I recently put out a podcast on should retailers put in place principles for rejecting products that aren't sustainable. I mean, we talked a lot about biodegradability on the podcast. Couldn't agree with you more that everyone's fixated on packaging. And yes, it is an issue, but there is so much more to the beauty industry than just the vehicle that the formulations are supplied in. Let's talk a little bit about the industry as a whole. There are so many new beauty brands coming onto the market all the time now. I mean, you alluded to this earlier as well. And obviously we work with thousands of them here at Formula Botanica. So what advice would you offer to anyone entering the industry now, having been in it for 13, 14 years? How do you think you can break through the noise in 2021, 2022?
I mean, it is a hyper-competitive space. I think there's lots of temptations. Well, let's start with the basic premise, and then there's lots to advise here. But fundamentally, if you're doing it to make money, please don't do it, because trust me, there are much, much, much easier ways to make money. I gave up a really high paid, great job. It was a brilliant job and didn't take a salary for years. All our money goes back into the business. It's not a route to making money. So that's the first step. This is not a quick rich scheme at all. Number two, I would say is, I think I sort of touched on it earlier, but you've got to be contributing something that is genuinely new to the industry or innovative or better. It doesn't have to be completely innovative, but it has got to be bringing something better. And I think particularly in this space, and I saw it a lot when I was starting out, a lot of my sort of competitor brands and friends who are competitors, you know, the world doesn't need more blended facial oils or more balms that are really easy to do from your kitchen, you know, and it's great. I mean, it's not to fault it because it depends on what your ambitions are. It's not that distinctive, and it's not, we've got so many of them, unless you can find a way to innovate there. That is genuinely a completely different lip balm. But you've got to think, does it actually meet a genuine customer need that is currently not met? Is it genuinely bringing something better to the market? If you cannot answer yes to those questions, stop and rethink and go away and think about, well, how do I do something that's genuinely new? Because it is hard. I'm not going to lie. It's really hard. So it really helps though, if you've got something that you genuinely believe in, the passion's got to be there, but you're genuinely contributing something of purpose and value to the business. I do think people are looking for really purpose-led brands now, and there's got to be purpose behind it. So that would be my kind of starting out advice of when you're trying to build a concept or brand or product. I think once you actually have started, I have made every mistake. I mean, literally every one you could imagine. So learn from me. But the big one is focus. And my team listening to this would just laugh going, yeah, right. Because we're not always very focused, but you'll see opportunity everywhere. And you know, a retailer might express some interest, or you might see a new market you want to pursue. And we've made that mistake so many times. You just do one thing well and stay really, really focused, and don't try and conquer the world, because you won't have the money. Someone in Dubai, you know, a retailer in Dubai wants you, great, but do you have any brand awareness there? Because if you don't, you're not going to sell. It's going to be a huge effort getting the stock there. You're going to have to take it all back. The temptation's everywhere. Just to put that into context, in the very early days, I remember our bank manager came into a meeting, and we'd had sort of 10 approaches from various places, and I was like, and this, and we've got this opportunity, and we've got this. And at the end of it, he was a lovely guy called James, and he said to me, that's great, Sarah. So of those 10 opportunities, which 9 are you going to turn down? And I've never, ever forgotten it, because he was right. He said, you can't do it all. How are you going to do it? You haven't got any people. You haven't got a salesperson. You've got 2 chemists and no salesperson. How are you going to sell it? So you just stay really, really focused and do one market at a time. Don't try and take over the world. Get traction in one market first.
Focus, passion, and purpose. Very, very good advice. Thank you. So just to round off this interview, you've given us so much value in the 45 minutes we've been going already. It's been lovely hearing about your story and everything that you do at Pai. So Look Fantastic named you the 5th most popular skincare brand in the world recently, with almost 5 million global searches for Pai Skincare in 2020. I mean, that is a phenomenal achievement in itself. So many congratulations. And then on top of that, you recently raised about $15 million in investment funding and debt for the company. Clearly, these are big milestones. You've built something incredible here. So what's next? Where do you want to take Pai Skincare moving forward?
Well, I mean, I said it at the beginning, we genuinely feel like we've been spending 13 years building some foundations, and we're about to get going. And honestly, we feels like there's lots to do, and that we honestly do feel like we're only getting started. And we are, you know, numbers wise, we are still a minnow in a big sea of very, very, very big companies and competitors. We have huge ambitions, and really, ultimately, I want more people to know about Pai. Not enough people know about us. Everyone deserves to have Pai in their life, in their bathroom cabinet somewhere. Everyone should have Rosehip in their bathroom cabinet, because it serves a multitude of skin purposes. But it's fundamentally that we just, you know, we need more people to know about us. And then in more practical terms, you know, we need to be able to meet that demand. So, and again, I touched on it earlier, but we really need to grow our factory. We're in the throes of that now. So hoping to make that move next year, because you've got to plan for the growth. But yeah, just the sky's the limit, really, because I just also think we've been doing so much right for so long. You know, we've been so passionately committed to organic and sustainability for so long. And it feels like our time is now. I feel like we've never been more relevant. time to make some hay. And fundamentally, why did I start this business? Because I knew there were lots of people like me who were struggling with their skin and weren't getting the advice they needed. We really want to grow our consultation service. It's a big part of what we do. I mean, we've talked about product today. We have a whole service piece to our business that's completely free for people. And I want to help more people. I want to help people hold their hand and fast track them to not a complete solution, because conditions are never easy to solve, but hold their hand and get them to a better place quicker.
Fantastic. Well, as you say, everyone deserves pie in their life. And I can't wait to watch you on this journey of the next steps of you building upon, as you say, the foundations. Although I think most of us would look at what you've built and think you're a little bit beyond that foundation stage now. So huge congratulations. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. It is wonderful to talk to you and to learn more about what you do. Where can people find out more about you? I mean, we'll put all the links to Pai Skincare underneath here, but if people want to follow you personally and the business, where can they do that?
So on Instagram is probably best, Pai Skincare _Sarah. You can find me there. Come and say hello.
We will include that link with the podcast. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Thank you, Lorraine.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope it's inspired you for what's possible in the indie beauty sector. Once you create an unstoppable and strong brand with focus and passion and purpose. I would love to hear what you think about this episode. Please do come and leave us a comment on our social channels as the Formula Botanica team, and I love hearing from you. And make sure you take part in the sustainable beauty polls and chats I run over on my Instagram channel at Lorraine Dallmeier. Thank you for joining Sarah and I for this latest episode of Green Beauty Conversations. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do leave us a 5-star review so that other people can enjoy these conversations too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast app is, and stay tuned for the next episode. Follow Formula Botanica at Formula Botanica on Facebook, Instagram, Clubhouse, Twitter, YouTube or LinkedIn. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com and sign up for our free online formulation course today.